Hello, and thank you for joining me today as we do this writer's workshop from the safety of our own homes. I'm Brenda Minton. I'm joining you from Crane, Missouri. I'm a love-inspired author. I've been writing since 2000, but published since 2007. I've written over 40 books for Harlequin Love Inspired. And today I want to talk to you about what's important to my writing, which is characters. I am a character-driven author. Yes, in writing, we have to have those three important elements. We need character, we need plot, we need pacing, and the three have to weave together to create a story that readers find believable enough that they want to go from start to finish, so that they get involved in the story and in the lives of the characters, rooting for them, wanting to see them have their happy ever after, and then missing them when the book is over. So as I start writing a book, I am typically thinking about characters. And I am that person even in my daily life. I am a character person. I love people. I love their stories. I want to talk to them and see what's going on in their lives and how they came to be from where they were to where they're at now. That's so important to me, even in line at the grocery store. I don't mind if the person behind me starts telling me their story, because I'm really going to file it away and use it again someday in a book, probably. So just remember that if you ever tell me your story. As a character, I typically have to know, as a character author, I have to know my characters before I start the story. And it's important to know how those characters bring the plot to life, or how they interact with the plot of the book. Because if you put the wrong characters in the wrong plot, you're going to struggle. You're going to be writing page 50 trying to figure out why is this story not working? Why are my characters doing all of the wrong things? And typically when that happens, we need to go back and look at our characters. So when we start, we want to look at character elements. And so, for myself, and I'm just shuffling my notes because I don't want to get off track. Just so you all know, I have 5 kids at home, and they could run in here at any given moment. This video has been delayed getting to Sharon for a couple of days now. Yesterday, I had to take a 16-year-old, speaking of characters, to get her driver's license. And after she passed the test, she almost drove through the license bureau. So today I've got, one needed shoes, and he's in and out of here. So at any given moment, there could be chaos in my house. So I'm using my notes to kind of keep me on track, because you will thank me later. Character backstory is typically where I start my stories, because I need to know who my characters were so that I know who they are now. Every one of us has a backstory. My backstory is I grew up on a chicken farm in Elsie, Missouri, and spent a good deal of my childhood making up stories and playing and building clubhouses. And then when I was 14, my mom passed away, and my entire idyllic lifestyle and childhood changed. And I went from this farm kid building clubhouses and playing kittens to a really troubled teenager, to figuring my life out and finding my faith again and meeting my husband. And now we're the parents of a total of 8 children. And so who I was created the person that I am today. There are so many aspects of my life that are here in me because of what I went through and who I was. And our characters need that same depth. You could take a character and say, this is a ballerina and she's going to fall in love with a football player. That'll be a great story, won't it? They're both athletic. But then you start writing your book and you're like, I have no idea why they should fall in love. I don't know who they are. I don't know how they're going to react to the situation that I've put them in. I don't know why they're going to be afraid of it or why they're going to embrace it. If you don't know those things about your character, it's because you haven't delved deeply into their past. You have to know what their childhood was like. What were their struggles? What brought them from point A to point B? Because we all know that every story has to have an overwhelming character arc. You have to see this character at the beginning, and they're going to grow. And that growth also comes from who they were in the past. And it's going to help push the plot to the very end. So if you don't have that idea of who your characters were, you're going to struggle with who they are now and making sense for the story. So first of all, figure out who they are. What are their fears? What are their dreams? What are their ambitions? Yeah, we all know goal, motivation, conflict, but something happened to them in their previous life that made them who they are today. And that's going to add depth, and it's going to add plot to your book. So whenever you start your book, try to think of your characters, think of their backstory, think of their dreams, their fears, what holds them back, what puts a wall up between them and the people in their life. Even if they're a secondary character, what are their quirky habits? What is it that they like to eat or don't like to eat? All of those things that make us real make your characters real. So you have to sit down and think of all of those aspects of their personality, not just that they have brown hair or blonde hair and blue eyes, or they're a ballerina, or they're a bull rider, or a doctor, or a lawyer. Those things are wonderful, but without the depth of their past, you're going to have a flat, one-dimensional character. So think about backstory so that when you start your book, your character is three-dimensional, and what they do and what they say makes sense to who they were and to who they are. When I started The Prodigal Cowboy, my May release, I had two secondary characters. One, the heroine, was buying a cafe, and everyone in town knew Holly. She's quiet, she's reserved, she has a mom that she has to take care of. She doesn't get truly involved in people's lives. She doesn't ask for help. Those character traits continued through so that she could be the heroine in The Prodigal Cowboy. But why? Why isn't she interested in sharing her life with everybody? Why is she hesitant to get involved in situations? Why is it she's just this person who hangs out at the back and does her own thing without really developing relationships and friendships? We needed her backstory. And her backstory was that she came from a home with a drug-addicted mother. She was raised by her grandmother, and she is struggling to still take care of her mother's health and maintain her business. The hero, Colt, has been doing his own thing for several years. He is a bullfighter for bull riding, and he grew up until he was 10 or 11 in this small town, but his father was an abusive alcoholic, so his mother took them and left and put them into a situation that wasn't much better. So at 18, he was done. He was out on his own, living his own life, but he's someone who cares about his family and cares about the people in his life. And he's grown up a lot and matured. And when he shows up in the book, he's dragging an 11-year-old girl with him. The girl is their daughter. And so that creates, the conflict of their personalities and something for them to work through. You always want to give your characters something to work through. If they don't have something to work through, then one character is over here doing their thing and another character is over here doing their thing, and it's two separate people living separate lives. My editor has a word that she likes to throw around. Well, she doesn't really throw it around. It's an important word. When she wants revisions, sometimes she says this book is episodic. It took me a little while to figure that out. an author friend and I would be like, episodic. We don't even know what we're supposed to do with that word. Episodic is when you have episodes, scenes, a scene here, a scene there, and the scenes aren't working together. They're not coming together to build the plot, to build the story. It's just here she is over here with her episode, and he's over here with his episode, and the story's moving on, but the two are not coming together. They're not working together on anything. The plot isn't involving both of them. So when you have your characters and you have your plot that involves them both working together, then you see your pacing stronger. It's not dragging. It's not skipping forward because you don't know what else to do with it. So all of those three elements work together to build a stronger book. When you know your characters, in this situation, Holly and Colt had a daughter together when they were in their late teens. They both realized that they weren't able to care for her, that they wouldn't be the best parents because they were both rather broken people. So they gave her up for adoption. And now her adopted mother has passed away, and she wants the two of them to work together to become parents. And so Colt shows back up in Holly's life. They have a past where there's a lack of trust. Holly has her past where she's been kind of a neglected, abused child who isn't very trusting. And Colt hasn't done a lot to earn her trust. And she's working very hard to keep her mother healthy and to keep her safe and to keep her business going. And so she pushes people back out of her life so that she's not hurt again. And she doesn't rely on other people or ask for help. So there is Holly's character, her character arc, where she needs to grow, how she needs to change, and the conflict that pushes the two of them away from each other so that they can eventually work on a way to bring themselves together and to build a family with their daughter. Characters. Even if it's a secondary character, they're important to your story. These two characters dragged along in other books until they got their own story, but through each book, readers would say, hey, what about these two? What about Holly and Colt? What are their stories? So even as secondary characters, readers wanted to know more about them. And haven't we all, once in a while, maybe you're at a dinner theater or at a park and you spot a family or you spot somebody by themselves and you wonder, what is their story? What is that lady doing sitting there by herself, sitting on a bench and looking a little bit lost? I wonder what her story is. And we want to create that same type of curiosity about our characters. You want to give them depth and detail so that they become real to the reader. So the reader wants more of them, wants to know more about them. And then as you write the story, you give them more of that character and you build that relationship so that it's real to the reader. When you're developing these characters, you have to make sure that the character makes sense. And the character is, their personality is a part of the point of view. Typically in romance, we have a scene in her point of view, a scene in his point of view, next chapter, the same thing. But the point of view should always go to the character that has the most at stake in that scene. But as you're writing point of view, that point of view should reflect your hero or heroine's personality. It should reflect their feelings. It should reflect their hurt, their hopes, their dreams. And if you know your character well enough, your reader will be able to sense the point of view of that character without you telling them. Every now and then my editor will say, now, whose point of view is this in? And that's when I have to go back and go, oh, wait a second, I have to dig a little deeper. Because point of view is so important for the depth and the emotional level of the story, because it reflects your character. It's where your character's innermost thoughts come out. It's where their emotions come out. and it's where the reader gets involved in the story. Yes, you want to have good dialogue, but you also want point of view that reveals a little bit in pieces, not in big chunks, about your character. You definitely don't want to hit your reader over the head with the backstory or with too much emotion. You give it in gradual increments so that they get to know the character, and you reveal a little bit as the story goes along, or you hint at things to come. That's important. The foreshadowing, that they know something is there, something's in the past that has to be dealt with. So if two people go outside, they take a look at the flower gardens or the lawn or the trees, and then they come back inside and they tell what they saw. It's going to depend on who they are, what they saw. If I go in my backyard, I'm going to tell you that my flowers are blooming and the birds are just going crazy right now and they're singing, and it's a beautiful summer, almost summer day. My husband would go in the backyard and say, oh man, this lawn needs mowed and where's my Roundup? That's a difference in who we are and our personalities. And you should be able to see that reflected in the point of view as you're writing your story. If you don't have a good handle on your characters, your plot could fall apart. If you come up with a great story idea and you're like, wow, I've got to write this book because, this plot is amazing. And so I need a hero and a heroine to put in this book. And so you out of thin air, you grab Joe and you grab, Helen over here, and you shove them into your book because she's a veterinarian and he's a cattle rancher. But that's as far as you know, or as far as you dig into their character. You got a veterinarian and you have a cattle rancher. Who cares? They're just two cardboard people in a story. And so you put them into your book because you feel as if that's what you need, but then you don't know who they are, and you're moving along in your story and you can't figure out why the characters aren't working, why the story isn't progressing, why you had this great idea for a great book, but it doesn't make sense. Then maybe you don't know your characters. And maybe you have the wrong characters. That's happened to me before. I've struggled to get something going, and I'm writing and I'm like, I've got this great idea, and I put the character in there and I start the book and it never feels right. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a second, that's the wrong character for this book. This book needs a character more like this, a character that's driven, a character that's not afraid. She needs to be someone who's willing to accept challenges, not someone who's reticent and just wants to walk away from everything. If you don't have the right character for your story's going to fall apart. The same as if you have two wonderful characters and you put them in the wrong book. You haven't figured out your plot. You came up with these two amazing characters and you tried to build a plot around them. It's also going to fall apart. You have plot, character, and pacing, and they all really need to meld together to create a book that flows and that makes sense to the readers. And when you put a book that makes sense, the readers keep reading and then they want to read another book. But if you struggle with that, and if you're struggling to get a book finished, or, people read it and I like it, but it just doesn't make sense, maybe you haven't thought through your characters and how they should interact together and with the plot of the book. If you have a point of view, and this always bothers me because point of view is really important to me. So two things about point of view. If you have a really masculine bull rider hero and he's noticing the lace curtains, you might want to dig it a little deeper into your point of view, because unless he has maybe his grandmother was an interior designer or made lace curtains, then that would make sense. But typically your bull rider isn't going to notice the lace curtains. He isn't going to notice the flowery scent of, the potpourri in the kitchen. That's point of view. That's what we would think. We're looking at that scene from our eyes instead of the hero's eyes. So knowing your character also adds depth to point of view, and then your point of view makes sense. And if your heroine is someone who has, suffered a lot of trauma in her life, maybe she's going to be more perceptive and emotional when she sees other people who are hurting. So that would add depth to her personality. And so you want to bring all of those things together to make your book stronger. Even when you create a secondary character who, in Cooper Creek series, I had Granny Myrna, and, she was meddlesome and she wanted the best for her grandchildren, and she wanted them all to find love, and she was a terrible matchmaker. So that was, the quirky personality that readers looked for from book to book because they got used to her. They thought they knew her. She was someone that maybe they thought, if they went to the local cafe, she's someone they might see there. So as you build these characters, you build a community, and it's more than just two people in a romance or two people in a suspense novel. It's a community that the readers feel as if maybe they've been there before. It's all a part of creating that world for them that they want to dwell in just a little bit longer. When they're done with your book, they want to move on to the next book because you've created characters that maybe they might see at the grocery store or know from next door or from their childhood home. All of those elements are so important to creating characters that are real to our readers. And I want to leave you with, and I've got my notes again because I don't want to miss anything. The plot is the vehicle that drives the characters and drives the story. Without a careful wedding of the three elements, character, plot, and pacing, your story suffers. And so if you're stuck, if the thing that we like to call writer's block, sometimes it's just you haven't quite got it figured out. Go back to the drawing board. There's something maybe that you're missing in your character or in your plot that's keeping you from moving forward in your story. So just, sit down with pencil and paper and try to figure out what it is that could make the book stronger, those elements, something that they have to work through together, something that they're working on together, something that they have to deal with personally that might help your book be stronger and your characters reveal a little bit more about themselves. Every author is different, so don't feel as if you have to write the same way that someone else writes. If you are a plot-driven author and you are a plotter, you're not a seat-of-the-pants writer, and you have to know every detail of your plot, that's fine. Just make sure that your characters make sense for your plot. Whether it's, edge of the seat thriller or mystery or women's fiction or romance, just make sure that your characters make sense and that their actions make sense and that their behavior makes sense for who they are and for the story that you're writing. For us character-driven authors, the plot is secondary, and that's my dog, by the way, but it shouldn't be forgotten. A strong plot means a story with strong, steady pacing. And just give me a second and I'll make sure that I've gotten everything that you need from me. Just remember backstory, personality type, their goals, what motivates them, what are their dreams, what holds them back, what is their fear, what is their deeper conflict, what are their insecurities. Those things that make a stronger character arc and a stronger plot. There are also character traits that might turn your reader off. Be aware of those. I've been reading books before where I've only gotten to chapter 3 or 4 because I just couldn't do it anymore. The heroine lacked compassion. The hero was weak and didn't really seem to care about anybody but himself. Those sayings will turn your reader off and make them close the book. And we want them to give our books a chance. Hold on just a second. I actually had something saved and I wanted to make sure that, I went over this with you, and of course I've lost it and I don't want to forget anything. Um, a character that you care about, your readers are going to care about. So just bring that character to life in a way that that you identify with, that you think your readers will identify with them, and give them traits that are real, that are genuine, and then move the story forward with those characters. Don't grab them out of thin air and try to shove them into a story and hope for the best. Make sure that your characters in your story are cohesive, and just look at who they are. And in building a community in a book, bring together those quirky characters, the grumpy old man down the street, the widowed lady who raises beautiful flowers. Bring those real characters into your story and they'll give depth to whatever you're writing. And I hope that you all will have some questions, and I hope I haven't rambled on too much. This is a little different, having to face myself on my screen, and it's a little bit daunting, but I hope that I haven't lost you, and I hope, like a really bad story with poor pacing, that you haven't skipped ahead and just said forget it. I hope you'll hang out with us and ask questions that I can answer, and I hope to see you soon in person. Thank you all.